the cafe that changed everything. What happened next would shake the ground beneath their feet and change everything they thought they knew about standing up for what's right. She handed coffee to the man with the dog right in front of the inspector. Her boss didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look angry, just cold, final. "You're done here, Elena." 6 years of loyalty erased in a single sentence. She didn't cry, just untied her apron, handshaking, and walked out. Not because she broke a rule, but because she stood up for a veteran and his service dog. What Elena didn't know was that someone filmed the whole thing. And before the cafe's morning rush was over, the ground began to shake. 4 military Humvees rolled into the lot. Out stepped a Marine colonel in full dress blues, a man who once owed his life to the very veterans she protected. And in that moment, everything changed. Elena Kowalski wasn't the type of woman people noticed first, but she was the one they remembered longest. At 35, she managed the Riverside Cafe near Fort Davidson, one of the largest Marine installations in the Northeast. She didn't run the cafe like a business. She ran it like a second home. The kind of place where someone could walk in after a long deployment and feel human again. What set the Riverside Cafe apart wasn't the coffee, it was Elena. She remembered names, birthdays, deployment dates. She made space for silence, especially the kind that came from veterans who carried more than just physical scars. Every Wednesday at 9 a.m. sharp, she hosted Heroes Hour. It started with just 3 veterans but grew over time. Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Veterans from every era found their way to her cafe. Elena would always say, "This is a place to be seen, not fixed, to sit, not perform." Everyone in town knew her story. Her husband, Staff Sergeant Gabriel Kowalski, was killed in action 6 years earlier in Afghanistan. His photograph hung above the register, not in uniform, but holding a coffee mug outside the cafe. It was taken 2 weeks before his final deployment. Elena never remarried. She'd poured her grief into the cafe, not to escape it, but to build something that mattered. For her, it was never about recognition. It was about the mission, the quiet one that didn't come with medals, but mattered just as much. And that Wednesday morning, the one where everything changed, started like all the others. Elena didn't know it yet, but by day's end, that little corner cafe would become the center of a storm that would echo all the way to Washington. It was a crisp Wednesday morning. Elena was behind the counter greeting the regulars when Dmitry Petrov stepped in with Thunder by his side. Dmitry was a quiet ex-Marine Corps recon veteran. Thunder, his service dog, wore a bright red vest. "Service dog, do not pet." Elena waved. "Table by the windows open," she said, smiling. He nodded and guided Thunder to the far corner. Then the air shifted. In walked a man in a navy blazer with a clipboard. His name tag read Roland Brennan, State Health Inspector. "An inspection," he said flatly, unannounced. He moved through the space checking surfaces and labels. Then he saw the dog and stopped mid-step. "That animal," he said loudly, pointing toward Thunder, "is in violation of state health code. No animals permitted where food is served." Conversations went quiet. Elena stepped out from behind the counter. "He's a registered service dog," she said calmly. "ADA law permits his presence here." Brennan frowned. "I don't care what vest he's wearing. Animals carry dander, saliva, hair. This is a food hazard. Unless you want this cafe shut down, that dog goes." Dmitry stiffened in his chair. Thunder looked up at Dmitry and waited. The room fell silent. Elena took a slow breath. "I won't ask a veteran to leave, and I won't ask his service dog to leave either. You're welcome to write your report, but you'll do it knowing you tried to humiliate a man who served this country." From across the cafe, someone muttered, "Damn right." But standing in the doorway now was Francesca Moretti, regional manager for the cafe's parent company. She'd arrived for a routine check-in, just in time to see it all. "Elena Kowalski," she said coldly, "you've just violated a direct health compliance policy in front of a state inspector. Pack your things. You're terminated." Gasps rang out. Elena looked around the cafe, at Dmitry, at Thunder, at the chalkboard that said, "Heroes Hour today, free coffee for vets." And she smiled, just barely. She untied her apron with trembling fingers, folded it, and placed it on the counter. Then she turned to Sophia, the young barista, and whispered, "Make sure Dmitry gets his refill." She walked out into the morning sunlight. No one followed, but someone pressed record. And somewhere in the ether of social media, a story had just been captured. A woman fired not because she broke a rule, but because she refused to break her soul. Far away, Colonel Antonio Vasquez got a phone call he wouldn't ignore. For 35 minutes, the cafe was silent. Sophia, the young barista Elena had trained, stayed at her post. Her hands trembled as she poured Dimitri's second cup. Dimitri sat quietly. He hadn't touched his coffee since Elena left. Thunder lay at his feet, sensing something had broken. Then it began, a low rumble barely audible, like distant thunder. Chairs wobbled, coffee rippled, the windows began to hum. From the east end of Main Street came 4 military Humvees. They pulled into the lot in formation, blocking the cafe's front doors. Out stepped Colonel Antonio Vasquez in full marine dress blues, decorated, composed, his ribbons numerous. Behind him, 24 Marines followed in formation. They stood at attention outside the cafe. Inside, no one moved. Inspector Brennan stood frozen. Manager Moretti had paled and stepped back from the counter. The bell jingled once, and Colonel Vasquez entered alone. His boots struck the floor hard, echoing through the silence. He stopped in the center, glanced at Sophia, then at Dimitri, who had slowly stood up. Their eyes met. Dimitri nodded quietly. The colonel returned it with a salute. Brennan stammered, I didn't know he was. The colonel didn't raise his voice. You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with basic dignity. He turned to Sophia. Is Elena Kowalski here? She was fired for standing up for Mr. Petrov and Thunder. Colonel Vasquez's jaw tightened. That woman gave my men a place to breathe when they came home with no words. She treated a decorated Marine with the respect this nation promised him. Dimitri cleared his throat. She didn't ask questions, he said quietly. She just poured the coffee and gave me a place to sit. That was the first time in a long time I felt like a person again. Colonel Vasquez nodded, then signaled to the Marines outside. They filed in, orderly, reverent. 2 Marines removed the corporate logo from the wall. Another replaced the chalkboard sign with a new one. Welcome to Elena's house, where honor is served daily. When Moretti tried to object, Colonel Vasquez looked at her once. You've made your decision. Now we'll make ours. He stepped outside, phone in hand. Sophia's phone buzzed. It's from Fort Davidson, she said. They've requested Elena report to base headquarters today. Elena drove to Fort Davidson, unsure what awaited her. Colonel Vasquez met her at the administration building. Let me show you something, he said, leading her to a room labeled Veteran Transition and Wellness Initiative. Inside were folding chairs, whiteboards, and unused supplies. This is a pilot program, he explained. We've been trying to get it off the ground for 2 years. You built a place where veterans with invisible wounds came to heal. You did more with coffee and kindness than some programs do with million-dollar budgets. A young woman stepped out, Carmen Rodriguez, mid-20s, burned scars on her arms, a golden retriever puppy beside her. I saw the video, she said shyly. I haven't been to a coffee shop since I came home, but I think I could sit in a place you run. Colonel Vasquez smiled. We'd like to offer you a position as director of this center. You'd run the programs, build the space, shape the culture. You already know what works. Elena looked at Carmen, thought of Dimitri, of Thunder, of all the veterans who'd found peace in her cafe. I'll do it, she said quietly. Word spread quickly. By week's end, the Veteran Transition and Wellness Center wasn't just another military initiative. It had become something alive. Elena did what she'd always done. She paid attention, remembered names, made space for silence and healing. Dimitri came often. Carmen showed up every Tuesday. Sophia visited every Friday, but not everyone was thrilled. Auditors arrived, questioning why someone with no formal training was running a federal program. What certifications do you hold? One inspector asked. I don't have certifications, Elena said softly, just consistency and kindness. A week later, she received notice. The center was being reviewed for national model expansion. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from the Department of Defense. Elena was nominated for the National Civilian Commendation for Distinguished Service to Veterans. The letter included an invitation to speak at the National Veterans Advocacy Conference in Washington. At the conference, she stepped up to the podium. I'm not a general or a doctor. I managed a cafe. I served coffee. I listened. But in that space, I watched something sacred happen. Veterans came not for advice, but for presence. They didn't need to be fixed. They needed to be seen. She paused. One day, I got fired for letting a man sit with his service dog. That was the moment everything changed. But it was never about coffee. It was about dignity. Applause thundered through the hall. Later, an older veteran approached with a faded photograph of her husband Gabriel and himself outside the cafe. "You poured me coffee the day I got my medical discharge," he said. "You just smiled. It was the first time I felt like myself again." Back home, Elena returned to the wellness center. She walked to the wall of photos and added one more, a snapshot of the conference crowd. Below it, she wrote, "Honor grows where kindness is consistent." As she turned to leave, a young veteran stepped through the door. "Is this the place for people like us?" Elena smiled gently. "No, son. This is the place for people like all of us." A message from True Veteran Stories. Elena Kowalski didn't wear a uniform or hold rank, but she upheld something sacred, dignity. She reminded us that honor isn't earned once, it's defended daily. What happened at that small cafe may seem rare, but maybe it shouldn't be. How many Elenas have we walked past without noticing? How many veterans have we thanked only with words, not actions? Elena's story asks us, would I have stood up like she did? Have I ever kept quiet when I should have spoken up? Share your story in the comments. Your experience could inspire someone else to do the right thing, even when it's hard. At True Veteran Stories, we honor not just the uniform, but the humanity behind it. Because sometimes the strongest stand doesn't come with a salute. It comes with a cup of coffee and the courage to do what's right, for distinguished service to veterans. She read it again, then again. "I didn't do anything special," she whispered. Colonel Vasquez chuckled. "That's exactly why you're getting it." The letter came with an invitation, not just to attend a ceremony in Washington, but to speak at the National Veterans Advocacy Conference. Elena felt her knees go weak. "I'm not a public speaker. You are now." The day she left for D.C., she packed light, just one blazer, an old watch of Gabriel's, and the same notebook she'd used behind the cafe counter for years. Names, birthdays, notes like "Carmen prefers tea" and "Don't ask Dimitri about May 15th." That notebook had carried more weight than any resume. As she waited at the airport, she heard someone call her name. "Need a ride, Miss Kowalski?" She turned to see Dmitry Petrov standing tall in full dress blues, thunder calm by his side, tail gently wagging. "The base assigned me as your escort," he said with a grin. Elena laughed, half nerves, half awe. "You clean up pretty good," he smirked. "You're the one about to speak to the Pentagon." The ballroom at the conference was larger than she expected. White tablecloths, polished brass podium, cameras at every angle. Her name glowed on the screen behind her in elegant lettering. When she stepped up to the microphone, her voice was smaller than the room, but the room leaned in. "I'm not a general. I'm not a doctor. I didn't write policy. I managed a cafe near a military base. I served coffee. I listened." A pause. "But in that space, I watched something sacred happen. Veterans came not for advice, but for presence. They didn't need to be fixed. They needed to be seen." People nodded. A few wiped away tears. "One day, I got fired for letting a man sit with his service dog. That was the moment everything changed. But the truth is, it was never about coffee. It was about dignity." Applause thundered through the hall. Dmitri stood in the back. He didn't cheer. He didn't clap. He just nodded, like a soldier hearing his orders finally, clearly. Later that night, as the sun dipped behind the Potomac, Elena stepped outside alone. She needed air, space, silence. A man in a gray suit with a white beard approached. Quiet, kind eyes behind thin glasses. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked. She studied his face. It stirred something. He pulled out an old photograph, grainy, faded. Gabriel, her husband, and the older man in uniform outside the cafe, long before her husband's last deployment. "You poured me a cup of coffee the day I got my medical discharge," he said. "You didn't say anything. You just smiled. It was the first time I felt like myself again." He held out the photo. "It's yours now." She took it with trembling fingers, words caught in her throat. Back home in Millbrook, the town held a welcome celebration. But Elena didn't go straight there. She returned to the wellness center. It was late, quiet. A few veterans still lingered near the fire pit. She walked to the wall of photos, reached into her bag, and added one more, a snapshot of the conference crowd giving her a standing ovation. Beside it, she taped the old cafe photo, the one with Gabriel and the soldier from long ago. And below them, she wrote a simple line: "Honor grows where kindness is consistent." As she turned to leave, a young veteran with nervous eyes stepped through the door. "Is this the place for, people like us?" Elena smiled gently. "No, son. This is the place for people like all of us." And just like that, her circle wasn't just full, it was open. A message from True Veteran Stories. In a world that moves faster every day, it's easy to overlook the quiet moments, the soft-spoken waitress, the trembling veteran, the wag of a service dog's tail. But sometimes those moments are the ones that shape us. Elena Kowalski didn't wear a uniform. She didn't hold rank, but she upheld something sacred: dignity. And in doing so, she reminded us all that honor isn't earned once, it's defended daily. What happened at that small cafe in Millbrook, Pennsylvania, may seem like a rare story, but maybe it shouldn't be. How many Elenas have we walked past without noticing? How many veterans have we thanked only with words, not actions? In today's divided world, Elena's story asks us to pause, to ask ourselves, would I have stood up like she did? Have I ever kept quiet when I should have spoken up? We want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a quiet act of courage in your own life? Or maybe you've been on the receiving end of someone else's grace? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience could inspire someone else to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Thank you for spending time with us today. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in quiet heroes. At True Veteran Stories, we tell stories that matter, stories that honor not just the uniform, but the humanity behind it. Because sometimes the strongest stand doesn't come with a salute. It comes with a cup of coffee and the courage to do what's right.